we are joined again by the illustrious Andrew Gold. This is my fourth or fifth time doing this introduction because technical difficulties are my friend. Andrew, we lovingly know as a dime store Hugh Grant. How are you doing today, Andrew?
Feeling good. Feeling like whatever the next thing up from a dime is, store Hugh Grant today. So good, and good to see you, man.
Good to see you. Now, you've got a new book. It came out today.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
come on, hold it up.
Do you want to see it reversed? Because I reversed my camera, so it would be mad if we actually put it out like that. But it's the Psychology of Secrets, my adventures with murderers, cults, and influencers.
It's the right direction from my end. So
that's funny.
Looks great, and I think I actually make an appearance in this book.
Oh, yeah. Well, there are very few books that you don't make an appearance in, Eric Hunley. And in this particular one, this was with regards to Lena Cisco, who you interviewed some time ago, who is an interrogator, or was at least an interrogator on Gitmo, is it? Guantanamo Bay. Mm-hmm. And she had this really intriguing way of getting truth out of people using a Game Boy. And so I wanted to use that bit, and I thought, what a nice excuse to give my friend Eric Hunley a little shout out. But what she did, I mean, I think one of the things that in the Psychology of Secrets that I want to get across is there is a little bit of, I wouldn't say a myth, but there's an over-reliance on the art of body language. And I think some people think it's as simple as, they look a bit shifty or whatever it might be, and that's somebody keeping a secret. And what we tend to find is that even judges and detectives are no better than the rest of us at knowing, just from looking at someone, if they're lying or keeping a secret. So what they do is they use all these, as you know already, they use all these really intriguing techniques. And it's really about knowledge and catching people in a lie. That's the best way that we have, the most scientific way anyway. And so she had this Game Boy that wasn't really functioning.
I will tell you what, I used a Game Boy in Gitmo.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Break it down. Tell me. Okay. Tell me a story.
As soon as I had another interrogator come in, and we were doing the ruse that the Game Boy was a polygraph, and we had this little thing hooked up to his finger, like it was nothing. And we drew out a plot. It was a quad, and he had to point to yes and no and all these answers. And we used the Game Boy to determine whether or not he was lying or telling the truth. So at the very first question, we had the Game Boy light up and say it was a lie. And he just went, oh my gosh, he panicked so bad. He's like, take the thing off me. I'll tell you the truth. And all the truth came just from a Game Boy.
And she sort of attached it to people as though it was some sort of lie test. And she would ask them questions. Were you in this place at this time? And when she suspected them of lying, she would push a button surreptitiously to make it flash and say, ha, you're lying. And people would then fold because they were thinking they really believed in the magical ability of a Game Boy. The reality was that it didn't work. So that's how you came up. That's how Lena Cisco came up. And that's how a Game Boy helped to decipher the honesty or dishonesty of prisoners at Guantanamo Bay.
Well, and that is a methodology. I interviewed somebody who got the polygraph found illegal for corporate jobs. He testified before Congress, actually went to prison because he was showing people how to defeat the polygraph. And so he was convicted. Now, keep in mind, he was convicted for proving you could beat the machine while he's saying the machine shouldn't be used because you can beat the machine. So it's kind of a dystopian consideration, right?
Yeah.
You're using a machine. It's a shady operation. It's very questionable, but then you get convicted for proving that it's questionable. How does
Kafkaesque. Very Kafkaesque.
It is very Kafkaesque. But one other scene, and might insert it here, is in The Wire. I don't know if you're familiar with the television show The Wire, and before that,
in the book
Homicide.
as
well. Oh, and Homicide: Life on the Streets.
The McDonald's bit.
The copy machine.
Oh, okay. So go on. You tell what your bit was, and I'll say if it's the same thing.
Okay. Bunk and other people had a person in the police station, and they fed in the copy machine. They asked a question, and then they hit the button, and it spit out liar or lie.
True. True. False. Load him up.
So can feel my heartbeat?
Pulse, yeah.
We ready, Professor?
Yeah.
We'll start with an easy one. Is your name, in fact, Deshaun Fredericks?
Yeah.
True.
And do you reside, in fact, the 1200 block of Woodyer Street in West Baltimore?
Yeah.
True.
And did you and Monel shoot your boy Pookie down on Carey Street just like Monel said you did?
Nah, no.
Lie. Lying motherfucker. The machine is never wrong, son.
Fuck, man.
And the person was like, what? And then immediately confessed on everything. It's the same exact principle as the Game Boy. But what's your story?
So the one, it was from The Wire, which I never watched, actually. It was very popular in the UK as well. I just didn't get around to it. And I know that's the thing that, even more than the culture wars, makes people really angry if you say you haven't seen The Wire or Breaking Bad or something. But I don't know why I haven't. But I've seen there's a clip where they are interrogating. They split up two suspects and they say to one of them, your friend has just told us everything and you're in trouble. And, to reward him for telling us the information, we've got him a McDonald's.
We even went to Mickey D's for him because he was so motherfucking helpful. 2 quarter pounders, big fries, McDonald land cookies, Dr. Pepper. That's how your boy rolled, right?
And so then the guy doesn't believe them. And then his friend walks past the door with a McDonald's in hand because they have given him McDonald's, but not because he revealed any secrets or anything.
Still ain't saying shit to y'all.
Yeah.
Monel, what the fuck?
And then he starts to blab because he's worried that his friends told him. So again, it's just, there's nothing they could tell about whether this guy was lying or telling the truth. It's just the simple case of tricking them, I suppose, into revealing information. And it worked quite well there.
Now, what's really interesting is I've interviewed Albert Vray, who is I wouldn't be surprised if you did talk to him. He is the top scientist on deception and a professor out of the UK. And I've interviewed him a couple of times. He informed me in our last interview that while in the United States, the police can lie. So technically they lied. They said, your friend is in there. We gave him McDonald's and he is giving up everything. Unless they didn't say those words, they lied. In the UK, apparently you're not allowed to lie. And I guess in other parts of Europe, I can't speak to them. But I find that very interesting. And that is something that we sometimes argue about or discuss on Layback Law is the police here can lie. Flat
It's
out
an interesting one.
lie to you, but they cannot there. And it's not even lies of deception. They can out and out lie completely. Not even the level of just, what would you say if I said somebody saw you there? Which is not technically a lie. That's just a deceptive statement, if you will.
Yeah.
They would just say,
it's a strange one, isn't it? I don't know what the right thing there is, because you don't necessarily want the police to be lying to criminals, but that's really the only tactic that they might have, or at least to be a little bit deceptive. You're fighting against somebody who is going to be deceptive, so you need to somehow fight fire with fire there. So I understand why police should be able to do that. It's a really difficult one, and I mean there are other ways they can catch them just by catching them in a lie. You could be honest. You can, if a suspect says, I can't have done the crime, I was at this particular place, the detective can say, I suppose without lying, oh, that's interesting because there was loads of traffic there because of the roadworks that's going on that road. And then the suspect, who probably wasn't there, is left in a very difficult position. And you can see how they start to stutter and start to imagine and go, oh gosh, what should I say? Yes, there was a lot of roadworks, or however they respond. So that's a way that you don't necessarily have to lie, but it might be that the detective doesn't know if there were roadworks, so they would have to lie about that. So yeah, I think it does really, I mean, I suppose that means the British police are really fighting with their hands tied behind their back a little bit there.
oh, maybe, but then using your same scenario, you could say that you were at that gas station at that time, right? Okay. Did you get gas?
Yeah.
How much gas did you have in the tank? Okay. Did you use the restroom while you were there? What were you doing? What happened when you went inside? Who served you? You used the self checkout. Okay. Was there a and you could ask all that. Was there a camera on that? Oh, okay. And then you can look at, hey, we need to go get footage. So you could even, without not even lying, technically, you could probably just keep drilling.
That's right.
Albert Vray did say one marker of deception is, ironically, truth tellers have more information. Like if you keep going back to the well, they often can keep coming up with more things as they remember or they come across them. Whereas liars are smart enough, for people trying to deceive, they know already that it's a limited story. There's a lot of exercise that the brain is going through to try to keep up the story, and you don't want too many details that can trap you.
Yeah.
So a certain amount of caginess can sometimes imply deception, just simply because, well, if the more you talk, the more you hang yourself. But while we're on that, the whole purpose often of deception is to keep a secret. And the secret could be yours, could be other people's. And I haven't been able to read the book, so you're going to have to walk me through. Do you go into, say, conspiracies between people? Because isn't that the ultimate secret?
I don't labor too much on conspiracies, except to go into sort of evolutionary biology theory as to why we have them. That idea of, if you hear a rustling in the bushes, it's better that you think it could be any kind of mad thing than just to say, oh, no, it's nothing. Because if it is something big and scary, you need to consider every eventuality. So it makes sense that we look for conspiracy theories. And I think we've seen time and time again that conspiracy theories have turned out to be true. Of course, Epstein's Island is one example. COVID lab, as a theory. I think that's not. We still don't entirely know, but people were getting kicked off Twitter a couple of years ago for even suggesting that, and now I think that's the leading theory we have. So I think we are a little bit too, poo-poo-ish on conspiracies, and it makes sense why we have them. It's also part of bonding, because secret sharing and the idea that you and some friends are in on something that other people are not is a key part to ideologies, to community. And of course, when it becomes too extreme, that's when you get cultish behavior, where you start to get, I believe, I'm a strong believer that cults are on a spectrum. And so you might be in a book club where that there's a theory about a certain book that you can't really say in your meeting. And if you do, the rest of your colleagues in the book club are going to kick you out. And if it so happens that the book club is all you have in your life, which is the case for many people, or whatever community it might be, you are then sort of pushed into silence. And if you are kicked out, you lose everything, all of your status. And it's very much a mimicking of what happens in the wild, a sort of evolutionary thing of being kicked out and you're on your own in the savannah to fend for yourself. There are a few things that are tougher than that. And the problem with that is you end up having to go in with the stuff that the rest of your book club say. Now, a book club might be a 2 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10 in terms of cultishness. But once you get into things like Scientology, like Heaven's Gate, or anything like that, like a 10 out of 10 kind of thing, that's when your entire life is just absolutely destroyed. And I did a good few chapters on the way cults and authoritarian rulers use secrets to make you obey and to keep you in place. Including, if you look at, one of the most interesting things with regards to secrets and Scientology is that a lot of us on the outside, and I know you probably know this, Eric, because you've been looking into Scientology a lot yourself, but a lot of people don't realize, yes, we know about Lord Xenu and the galactic overlord stuff, and there were billions of people on his planet. It was overpopulation, and this is the origin story of Scientology, and it was mocked heavily on South Park. WikiLeaks did a whole thing of it, so now most of us know it. But the irony here is that most Scientologists don't know it. So that's a case of the cult keeping secrets from its own members. And not only do they not know it, but they are discouraged and disincentivized from trying to find out, because they're told that if you do find out too early, you get pneumonia. This echoes when the religions used to be a little bit cultier, I would say 1,000 years ago or a few hundred years ago, when the Bible wasn't allowed to be printed in English. So most people who were Christians back in the day weren't able to get their own readings. They didn't know what the scriptures, they didn't know what was going on. They had to just take it from their local priest. And what that does in Scientology or Christianity hundreds of years ago is forces people to keep going to the church or to keep going to the community or whatever it is, and to trust everything that those people above you say, because you are left in ignorance. And obviously, as we know, information is power.
Well, and all that Scientology, I would argue, learned their tricks from North Korea. One of the things that they do in Scientology, and it goes deep into secrets, is you and I are Scientologists. And so you and I go out for an evening, we're doing whatever with our wives, and we will go
Speak
through.
for yourself, mate.
There you go. I think it's called an auditing or whatever. And I would go in and they say, so what did you guys do when you're out, on your double date? What happened? Did you talk to anybody? Did anything happen? Blah, 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 blah. Then they would ask you the same exact thing. And I would know that they're going to be talking to you about whatever we did. And you would know that they're talking to me about whatever we did. So you would have this pressure from the outside to, quote, come clean. And then I believe also in Scientology, you're supposed to reveal like everything that has ever happened to you that makes you feel any which way. And all of this documentation now is on the record. So if you beat your wife when you were such and such, or you were beaten such and such, or you have this sexual peccadillo that you're trying to conquer, it's all there. And if you're going to leave, hey,
Well, beyond that as well, because it's also, you have to make up stuff because they're never satisfied. So they'll sort of torture you and keep you in a room until you give up more information that never happened. One example of that, which was actually a fairly tame example, but it's Alex Barnes-Ross, English ex-Scientologist, who was made to sit there until he confessed something, and eventually all he could come up with was, I stole money from the counter when I was buying lunch or something like that, and that was enough for them to kick him out, actually. But and a lot of the time, this is an interesting thing about the way beliefs form, is the Scientologists, it's not that one day they wake up, the ones who leave, it's not that they wake up and say, oh gosh, this is nonsense, all of this Xenu stuff, if they are at the stage where they've learned about it. It's that they were treated so badly in the cult that eventually they were either kicked out, as many of them are, for some minor misdemeanor, or they have to leave because their lives are just being torn apart. And it's only when they're on the outside and they shed their cultish tribe and they find a new tribe on the outside, and that new tribe has different opinions and beliefs, only then do us humans start to then take on the beliefs of the new tribe and start to dismiss the ones of the old tribe. And it's quite a remarkable thing. We don't like to think of ourselves that way. We like to think of ourselves as having some form of agency and power and independence, and to say, I'm just a critical thinker and I'm really good at it. Well, the evidence shows, at least with people who have fallen into cults, that that's not the way round it works. It's more that you just move to a different group where it's more acceptable to have a different kind of thinking system, which is a bit sad, I suppose.
That is a problem. I've actually discussed it with John Atack and Jamie Mustard, I believe is the name, on the side mostly, but also on the show. I have come to find, because I've talked to different people who have been in cults and suffered cults, that many of these people are so indoctrinated in a cult mentality or tribe, as you put it, that when they leave, they tend to form into another cult or tribe sometimes. Yeah. And I think there's something like that even going on in the Scientology realm with something called the Aftermath Foundation or some variant on. I don't know if it is a cult. It's a kind of an anti-cult, but then it's like, I would argue that Antifa are fascists themselves. Sometimes the people who are against something are also that thing in their tactics.
Yeah. Yeah, it appears to be that I'm going to really simplify things, and but it seems to be that some people are, and generalized, but there seems to be there's two types of people, and there are those who are quite authoritarian and want to control how others think and do, and like to consider themselves to be more righteous than other people. And there are people who are more live and let live and whatever it might be. And that kind of authoritarian strain, of course, I mean, a cult is really attractive to those people. I think we do this whole thing a bit of a disservice when one of the lines that is parroted out a lot from ex-cult members is this continuous insistence that I'm careful how I say this because I don't want to offend people who have left cults, but there seems to be this, we all have to jump on board this idea that if you joined a cult and left it, you're not stupid, you didn't do anything wrong, you were the victim, but you're really smart anyway, and it can happen to anyone. And that's one of those things that fails both empirically because there's no evidence of that, and I think also anecdotally, I mean, it fails the eye test, or just basic, we can see that most of us would not fall into a cult. We fall into some cultish thinking, we fall into some forms of ideology, but I mean, Stephen Hassan is an example. He's a very, very smart person, and he's really, really clever, and he came up with the BITE model about cults, but he also signed up to something called the Moonies, which spoke about the second coming of Reverend Moon, second coming of Jesus, or whatever. Absolute loony stuff. So I just, no matter how long I spend looking into cults, I have found nothing to suggest that you or me or most of the listeners here could be hoodwinked into joining up to some sort of form of cult that says that Reverend Moon is the second coming of Christ. Now, there are all sorts of reasons that Stephen Hassan, who clearly is an extremely intelligent, academic, smart person, might fall into that. He was particularly vulnerable at the time. I think his girlfriend had broken up with him. There were these girls who approached him and all of these different kinds of things. But I don't think that most of us would have done that. So I think it is a particular kind of mind. And in the wrong hands, that mind can be dangerous. I'm not suggesting Stephen Hassan is dangerous, of course. I'm talking about the average person who leaves a cult. And the thing is, because their cult tends to be, a lot of the cults and religions, a little bit socially right-wing. If we talk about social things, like they tend to be homophobic. That's an example. They don't like gay people. They don't like other religions and races. It tends to be that. When they come out and they see the whole woke thing, which seems to be saying to them, hey, everyone can do what they want, and we're pro this and pro that. It seems to be the opposite of the right-wing fascist religious thing they were part of. As you were alluding to, unfortunately, it's actually two sides of the same coin. And the smarter thing would be for them to come out and to say, hey, I've just been in a cult for 20 years. I'm probably not the person that should really be leading these activist causes. I should leave it to other people who might have more nuanced views. But unfortunately, the way the mind works, they're so excited, they're love-bombed by the other side, they join up to it.
Right. Well, using that theory, I think of the political compass in terms of left, right, up, and down. And I'm more concerned about up and down, with me being more on the downside, which is more of a libertarian or anti-authority. But if you actually look at the line of, quote, left and right, it's more like a U, meaning that ultimately, you go to each end, they're right next to each other when you arrive. If you get to any extreme, because all extremes are basically a purity test. And that's what I don't like. So even the libertarian side, by the way, if you get into deep, hardcore libertarian anarchism, well, that becomes extreme too. Like no driver's licenses, no this, no that. You could do any. So I do personally have problems with fundamentalism, I guess, if you will. But you have to be pure enough. Now, I will push back, though, and I will say that I think that more people can fall into a cult than we give credit for, because I consider the smallest cult to be an abusive relationship.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But there are levels, aren't there? Because there's an abusive relationship, and then there's like someone believing that a Korean guy, or someone believing in Lord Xenu. There are levels to the extent to which our brains are willing to go. I don't think you have to imagine something totally bonkers to be in an abusive relationship, except, oh, this guy's a nice guy when he's not. That's something we could all fall for. We could all fall for some sort of lottery scam. We can all get into a bookshop, library, or whatever, whether it's getting a little bit too hot. But to fall into Scientology, I would argue, is a different level.
It could be, but consider the boiling frog aspect of it, and also consider that. I've talked to Rick Allen Ross, and he's talking about multiple surgeons, very highly educated people, etc. a lot of this is a vulnerability in people's lives, or they're in a point of serious change in their lives. And all of us go through periods where something happens to change our status, our job. It could even just be graduating college or something. It could be something minor like, I've gone to school and I want to change the world. I want to help some people out. And you meet this organization, and this organization's all about, helping these other people, and you get deeper and deeper into, it's not necessarily an overnight thing, but I just want to always give grace, if you will, to some people who can fall in to that scenario. Now, there are some people who I think are less vulnerable to mind control and the cult, especially, I hate to say it, an engineering mindset, but that particular kind of person, I don't know if you've dealt with them. I've been in IT much of my life, who are just so detail oriented, so uber precise, and take everything literally. The Sheldons of Big Bang Theory, if you've ever seen that show, they can be very difficult, because part of manipulation of people, like I've had Chase Hughes and others on, is you need to move it along. It's kind of like sales. They're always doing a hard sale. Why? Because they don't want you to walk away. They don't want you to leave the room. So, today only, Andrew, I'll give you 10 more %. My manager's going to kill me. Don't tell anybody, but 10 more % off, right? Because I don't want you to leave. As soon as you leave, you start cooling off. You go have lunch and you're like, I don't know. Do I really need the vinyl siding?
Yeah.
It's good.
Less social pressure.
Exactly. Less social pressure. But an engineering person, or that mindset, and I'm only saying engineer because they're kind of like that, is very uncertain. Well, why would you do that? Are you sure? Is that right? And they tend to, look at every single detail. And I'm like, come on, we got to move the sale. We got to move the sale. So that is a factor too. I do think some people are more wired and less wired. People who want to change the world and are do-gooders, and I mean that in a nice way, just really they want to get behind a cause, are far more vulnerable to be in a cult, because there are aspects of the cult, companionship, family, community, that in of themselves are not negative. It's the overall how it's applied.
The reason I'm being a bit negative, I think, is because I spent so many years now just doing cults, which I don't really do so much now. I think I just culted out. But I spent so many years in that, and just heard that line parroted time and time again of like, these people are victims. They're just trying to do good. And you are absolutely right. And but I just got so tired of hearing it, even though that is true, that I wanted to also say, well, okay, but these are also bad things as well. This idea of I can change the world is a very solipsistic, conceited kind of behavior and outlook. It is quite immature. And also, to join a cult, typically you need to want to climb ranks, climb status. You have extreme ambition, and it means ruling over other people. And it's amazing how quickly a lot of those people who went in with these great ambitions for changing the world end up bullying those beneath them beyond anything we can quite imagine. And that is another thing I would label at some of the ex-cult members that I have been interviewing and have been friends with over the years now, is some of them are not entirely apologetic, and they don't seem to entirely accept what they actually did, because some of the stuff they did is outrageous to other cult members. And now they're out, they're just like, hey, I'm a big YouTuber. And it's like, well, yes, but fine. I don't know if I need to be lectured by you about cult thinking, because I've never thrown someone into the ocean. I've never made someone run around a tree for 2 days. Right. I've never separated families from their children. I've not done those things. So maybe Eric and I can tell you about cult thinking instead of listening to you, who has been bullying and hectoring people for years and years and now is making money off it. So that's where I get this sort of negative, cynical side from. But you're right that I mustn't forget the other side, which is a lot of people are just vulnerable and lonely and just want to do good, and they're sort of tricked into these things.
Yeah. And by the way, it's not only cults. A lot of these things run together, but scams.
Sure.
Scams and cons. I mean, People have quoted that a cult leader is a con man that just keeps conning the same people over and over.
Yeah. The only difference, though, is that the cons, unless you're talking about multi-level marketing, which is where the two meet, but a con often is just like, hey, we can give you loads of money. Give us your bank details, right? And that can be a con, and that's just a vulnerable old lady or an old man, right? Or an old non-binary person. Not really, but it can be, that can be just some poor schmo, Whereas the cult itself, including multi-level marketing, tends to have, and also you're going to be the leader of a bunch of people and you're going to get to the top of the whole thing. And that's where I start to go, well, hang on, this is not just vulnerability. This is also ambition, and maybe dark ambition.
I disagree. Both are ambitions.
Maybe.
Both people are being victimized. Typically, the con is you are getting something for nothing or for very little, and it's a lot of money. So there's a little bit of a greed factor. Hold on. But then with a cult, you're just going back to the same well. So I would argue that Scientology fits perfectly in that, where instead of hitting you one time, Andrew, hey, you got 20, I got this, I've got this money order coming in and I've got to cash it. If you're giving them this percentage of it, I'll let you have 50% over. And then you find out the whole thing's a scam. I just ran off with your money. We never see each other again. That's a one hit. Scientology, you're going to be donating to this organization that you belong to, and then you keep donating. So I just keep tapping the same people.
But there's got to be a difference, though, between some poor old person or young person, again, who has just been told, like, hey, well, you've won £1 million. Here's what's your bank details and we'll give it to you. That's somebody who wants to be able to maybe support their kids, put food on the table, excited about taking some nice holidays. And that kind of thing, I feel, is a little... I've made a value decision here. And to me, that's a value that I appreciate and approve of, I suppose. Whereas what you're being told in Scientology is the opposite. You're not winning £1 million. You're giving £1 million, or you're giving hundreds of thousands. And in return, you're getting some sort of enlightenment. But really what you're getting is the opportunity to move up ranks and be in charge of people and to make them do what you want. So that's the value decision I've made, where I've said that's worse of the two.
Okay. You said cults are on a spectrum, right?
Sure.
So these are all on the spectrum.
They're all on a spectrum, but they're different kinds. They're different kinds of things. I would say they have cultish elements to them, but I think Scientology is a cult and a con. Whereas a con, that's just a con. It's just someone calling up and saying, "Here's some money. Give us your bank details." I'm not sure that is cultish. I think that's just a con.
Okay. Well, and again, we can go deep into that because there's some wonderful crossover things like pig butchering scams and different things like that. I don't know if you covered, which I do think a person is more of a victim in that case.
Yeah.
So there are, again, just like everything, a lot of the cult people are never going to climb the ladder. They don't necessarily know that. They just keep going on. And there's even cults. I forgot the name of it, but there's one for people who do exercise, like runners. And then there was Synanon, which was people who quit drugs, and that turned into a cult. So a lot of these get crazy. But let's circle back around to secrets, since one of the biggest factors of a cult is a secret. What inspired you to write a book about what's behind a secret? Because I think you were looking, I want to write a book. What do I write a book about? And then you got inspired. Oh, this might be cool.
Yes. Well, firstly, I just want to say about Synanon that Amanda Montell, who wrote the book Cultish, which actually first gave me this concept of cults on a spectrum and things being cult-ish. Her dad was in Synanon, as it happens, and she wrote this brilliant book. What got me into secrets? I mean, there's a couple of reasons. So firstly, in a very practical author way, I had all these stories. So stories about a crazed exorcist, as you know, stories about a man who pretended he was a child, a friend of Churchill's, who started a school so he could be whipped by kids at the school, and he pretended he dressed up as a kid. He was like 55, and no one was on to him. That was a mad secret. Stories about what I have to call on YouTube a PDF pedophile. These are people who go to playgrounds and whatever they do, and those kinds of dark stories, which are maybe more in the true crime genre really than anything else, but psychology as well. And I just thought, okay, if I'm going to write this book, it can't just be a book about any one of those characters. It's going to have to be something that connects all of them. And what connects all of these people is they're keeping secrets. And I was intrigued about how that affects their lives, their family lives. How are they able to think about anything else when something's a secret like that? Now, the other thing was this. I started this book 2.5 years ago at a time when my YouTube channel was significantly smaller. And I think they say about micro influencers, as in those with between 1 and 1,000 followers or whatever it is, are actually the most valuable influencers to brands, because they everybody who follows a micro influencer really knows who that influencer is and will probably interact with them, and they have this two-way interaction. Whereas if you look at Beyonce or whoever, Kim Kardashian, who's got maybe 500 million followers, half of those people aren't even active. Half of them aren't even, so per person, a micro influencer has a lot more interaction with their fans and viewers. And things. So I was at this stage where I was every day in conversation with my viewers and subscribers. And I found that time and time again, they would message me and tell me their deepest, darkest secrets. And I hadn't asked for them. It was just, hi, Andrew. I like your podcast. My first ever memory, by the way, is my grandfather putting his hand down, and I'd be like, oh, okay, that's enough. So I started to wonder why. Why are they telling me, of all people? And it's not just me or you as podcasters and YouTubers. We tell hairdressers. We tell therapists, of course. We tell teachers. What is it about that? Bartenders, that's a great one. What is it about these relationships? What makes us trust people? Who do we reveal our secrets to? So then I had this sort of double reason, I suppose, to make the book. On the one hand, it's like, look at these people with dark secrets. What does it do to us? Should we reveal more secrets? Should we keep them in? And it turns out that it can physically really impair us, keeping these kinds of secrets. And then on the other side, of course, I lost my track of thought. What was my other point?
We'll get to it, because I want to touch on the first one, because there's so much ground covered here. What actually made you connect the idea that with all this true crime or whatever's going on, what made you say it's secrets? Okay. Secrets are the connecting juice. What inspired you to, come upon that? Because that's a really important thing that you just stated, and you kind of blew by that. So I want to know how you said, if I distill all of this down and I really look into it, they're held together by secrets.
Well, I think when you're a journalist, you get to know your subjects in a different way, as I'm sure you've experienced. And for example, the topic of those PDF files, it doesn't mean that you necessarily humanize them any more than anyone else would. But it does. You do have this kind of protective hat on when you are doing a journalistic story. I could talk to a murderer or just somebody who's done the worst thing ever. And all I'm thinking really is, well, this is my job. I'm here in my profession. There are plenty of people, doctors, for example, have to do that as well. They operate on somebody who might be awful. Well, they put that to the side. They do their job. So I'm doing my job. And even though these are horrible people that most people wouldn't ever want to cross paths with in real life, I'm just there as the journalist, and I'm talking to them. And you become almost not necessarily friendly, but you talk. And so I suppose you do start to see them more as humans. And you do start to think, okay, this PDF person, that I interview in the book, this is chapter 9. The whole chapter is about her. She's a 25-year-old woman. You don't expect that. That was very rare. It took a long time to find someone like that. Now, I should just state she's a non-offender. She tells me she's never, ever touched or done anything to anyone. She's never watched any of that stuff, but she has those urges. Okay, and everyone has a different opinion about that. But I spent the whole day with her, and she's sitting there sort of crying to me about some of her urges and how much she hates herself and all of this stuff. And I'm thinking, well, this is terrible. What, having to keep a secret like that. And of course, that's a particularly gross and weird one we don't like to think of. But then you can think of someone like Alan Turing, the code breaker, who had to keep secret that he was gay. And he had a whole life around secrets because of the codes and the enigma and all of these things. His whole life was about secrets. And he couldn't even let out the one about his own sexuality. Well, how cruel is that? And the more I looked into secrecy, I found that secrets about your identity are the worst ones or the hardest ones to keep. They can really send you insane. So one bit of advice, if you are keeping a secret, is to try and, as much as you can, manipulate it in your mind to distance yourself and your identity from that secret and say, hey, that isn't what I am, this secret, what I'm keeping. That's not who I am. I'm not going to let that define me. And you feel a bit better. But anyway, it was just a case of looking at these people and going, wow, these are humans and they're not allowed to tell a single soul about what's going on in their minds. Why is that? What is that doing to them? And how can we make ourselves feel better when we're keeping a secret? And who should we reveal to? And who do we? And I had to find out as well. As a journalist, it's important to know. It's important for you. It's important for me. It's important for most of us. You want to get secrets out of your friends. What kind of personality attributes can you focus on to make sure your friends or your interviewees are telling you secrets and not just you being on the side? And that was really interesting for me as well.
You bring up good points because we have a job, as you put really well. And technically, you and I, our boss is our audience. And if we're not providing the content to our audience, then we're not doing our job. But then again, when you're interviewing somebody, and if they're sharing things with you, and this fact that they share with you is quite salacious or extremely interesting, but it could potentially ruin their lives, I think that our jobs start to get a little confusing. It starts to be a question of, dare I say, ethics or morals of, do you destroy this person's life by revealing what they told you? What is your actual obligation to your job? And I would love to get your thoughts on that, about sharing the secrets that are divulged to you. Some of them are obvious, like if they are going to do harm to somebody and you know that is imminent, then you should talk to the authorities. Not necessarily the other person, but you should definitely talk to the authorities or whatever, or report it in some way. But how about things that are not imminent per se?
Well, I think a good example of that, one of these PDF guys was a man I met who goes by Max, and he's not in this book. I might put him in another book, because this was during some research I was doing in Berlin some years ago. They have a clinic there called Kein Täter werden, which means don't offend. And so I was meeting with the clinicians, and they set me up with some of their patients, because I was just fascinated by the whole concept and what makes these people who they are. And I met one of these guys, and it's a whole long story, but I'm gonna shorten it and just say, because I've told it before as well, I think. But I went to meet this guy. It was the first one of them I'd ever met. I was petrified. My heart was jumping out of my mouth at the time, really. And he wanted to meet at a public Schwimmbad, which is a swimming pool. It was really odd. And I didn't get it. And I went over there and I went and met him, and he had a little girl with him. And then eventually it turned out there were 3 girls around the age of attraction of the kids that he babysat. That he was attracted to, and he said that he was babysitting them. And I was like, well, does the mum know about your condition? And he said yes, and I didn't believe him. And at that point, I felt it was my duty. I mean, he said, look, I would never, ever, ever do anything with these kids. I could have called the police over, and the police would have said, well, has he done something? And I would go, I don't know. What can I do then? And, and there's part of you as well, journalistically going, I don't want to make things worse for these kids. What if I cause an argument, or I don't know what? And part of me going, I need to stay close to this guy and let him trust me if I want to find out any kind of truth. And suddenly you go from being like a freelance journalist to almost in a very arrogant way, just going, I'm now a detective, or whatever it might, if I call the police now, it's over, kind of thing. But at the end of the day, all I could really do was firstly insist that I met the mother of these children, and I did, and she turned out to be a left-wing lunatic who considered these people to be like minorities who were being badly treated and whatever it might be. And I was like, that's fine. It's a very intriguing philosophical point, but you don't test that on your children. And then I went and spoke to the heads of the clinic who had first set me up with him. And they just said, look, thanks for taking it to us. We'll keep a close eye, but that's all we can do right now until we have any evidence of anything bad actually going on. So that's a case where I suppose he was my interviewee, and I don't know. I mean, he certainly wouldn't have wanted me to divulge some of that information to the people at the clinic and that kind of thing. But I pushed. At the same time, you get a huge sense of burden when you're interviewing these people and you get their secrets, being aware that if you were to let something slip, that could be the end of them. Someone could go and kill them. And that's quite a big thing in real life. If you think about someone actually being killed because you let some words slip out on a page. So I had to be very careful with some people in the book not to reveal details. I still panic a little bit. I look at that book, it's like 330 pages, and I'm like, how many of the people in there? And it's not just those kinds of people. It's just people who are nice people going about their day, who don't want to be, who haven't done anything wrong. Somebody with a kind of OCD and somebody who's got another mental issue going on.
Or Turing's your example. He didn't do anything wrong. He just had an affliction.
Yeah, well, because he's dead, I'm not too worried about. But if there were an alive version of Turing now, and I'd just written about him, I would be. You do start to look at your book and go, God, have I accidentally left some sort of revelatory detail in there? God, and I am a bit panicked about that. I'd have to read it back through, but I don't think I have. But look, the burden of the secrets of others is a big thing. The other thing to know, and that people should know watching this, is if you reveal a secret of yours to a close friend, no matter how close they are, they're incredibly likely to reveal it to at least one or two other friends. And that actually gets worse the closer they are to you. So, and maybe that's fine. Maybe you've got the kind of secret where you don't mind your friend telling that to a couple of other people, but it's something you have to go into it knowing, and you can't blame your friend too much because humans do it. It is just a human trait.
That's actually a good question I have for you. And I'm very fortunate that one of my closest friends happens to be my lawyer too. But anyway, so they tend to be equipped to holding secrets because that is quite literally their profession, lawyer-client privilege, things like that. Being friends with a priest or talking to a priest may also be good. If someone is religious, that is another option. So I want to ask you, Andrew, what about these secrets? Because now the burden has been passed to you a little bit, that people are sharing things with you. And I've experienced this too. There are certain things where, yes, I know information. I've been told things. I can confirm it. And I see commentary or I see people making statements, and I know that it's absolute bollocks, to use your language, or rubbish. But the only way I could make a statement would be to reveal something that has been shared with me on the side. And that's not necessarily pleasant. I personally compartmentalize and am deliberately forgetful and just kind of, shove everything away. But how do you cope? How do you cope with these secrets, especially the ones when you seek out individuals who would be reviled by most of the planet?
Yeah, it's tough, and it's something to bear in mind. Again, not because I said before, when you tell someone your secret, they're going to tell it to someone else. Another thing to bear in mind is when you tell them a secret, you are giving them a burden. You are, and the more secrets like that they have, the more of a burden it is. The good side of that, the flip side, is you're increasing the intimacy between you and them. You're saying, hey, you're the one I've selected to reveal this information to. We have a bit of intimacy going on here. However, it's also a burden. So there's two sides to that coin. For me, it's the same as you. It's hard. You get used to it with the years, as I'm sure therapists do. You hear more and more crazy, mad stuff, and eventually things don't mean anything anymore. And I end up talking about PDF files or whatever at a dinner party, and people are like shocked. And I'm like, God, I've been working in this for too long. I've heard way worse than that. And, think about people who have to work in things like crime scenes and whatever, the kinds of things they see. I suppose you do get used to things, but it is a burden. You're right that you sometimes want to use the information that's told to you. You can't. One of the interesting things they find in surveys and things is that it had previously been thought that having to think up excuses to keep a secret was the most stressful part and the most damaging part. And, like how many times a day you have to think about, oh God, what will I tell my wife if she thinks I was there when I wasn't? Or so it's not that they have found now. It's actually the frequency to which you mind wander, to your secrets, or you ruminate about them. So it's not trying to hide them that causes the stress. It's just how often you think, oh gosh, I've got a secret. And that is about the discrepancy between the self you show to the world and the secret one inside. And it causes shame. And that's really, really difficult. And there seems to be an evolutionary biology or a theoretical process that goes on, which is called the fever model. And your body seems to create an environment, just as a fever would, that is hostile to the secret. So a fever, of course, as we know, it makes you so hot and it makes your body basically uninhabitable for the virus. But unfortunately, that hurts you as well. But eventually the virus hopefully gets killed by those difficult conditions before you get killed. With the fever model around secrets, the idea is it makes it so hard for you. You start to think about it. You start to feel shame around your secret, around the secrets told to you by other people that you can't reveal. And the idea is to get you to reveal those secrets. And I think the theory behind that is that if you're in a tribe, it makes sense that most people would reveal secrets to one another. Otherwise, we would have tribes without any social cohesion, because you'd have 100 people or 50 people who are just hiding food, hiding shelter, being awful, double-crossing one another. So that's how, I mean, the tribes that had people who found it physically difficult to keep a secret would have thrived better and passed on their genes.
Okay, so that almost makes me think of some of the autoimmune diseases or things that come about. I wonder if that could be caused, like a rash or just different things because of the stress of withholding the secret as time goes on. That which is would be a fascinating study. It'd be pretty hard to get the people to participate, though.
Ulcers. But they do say ulcers. There are even studies that link secret keeping to cancer. And ulcers and all sorts of difficult, again, is it just the stress? They suggest it's not just stress. It is literally secret keeping. And again, with those studies, I always take them with a little bit of a pinch of salt, because I just think, well, how much can you replicate them? But look, I've included those in the book, and readers can make of them what they will. But we do know, and it's been portrayed for years in literature, which for me is a kind of historical account, even though it's fiction. But you look at Crime and Punishment; it's the perfect example. Dostoevsky's masterpiece, where Raskolnikov, the main character, kills a woman. It's not a spoiler because it's right at the beginning, but to see what it feels like to kill, and you see how he physically starts to deteriorate and fall apart from having to keep the secret. And I thought that's a fascinating example, because humans were the same 200 years ago, just as they were 1,000 years ago. And it's always been physically painful to keep those secrets.
And by the way, if you want a short version of the same thing, check out Edgar Allan Poe's Telltale Heart.
Oh, yeah, I included that as well.
Okay, because that one sums it up so perfectly, of the guilt and the fear and everything coming in and internalized. I'm going to change gears because I've got you on, I've got the journalist on, and I actually interviewed a whistleblower who is whistleblowing on the whistleblowers, and he pivoted to doing undercover reporting, and I think he's moving out of it. Where I'm going with this, though, is I'm a big believer in undercover journalism, in the sense of, sometimes you need to walk into a thing, I'll go on the high level. You go into an auto shop, you take your car in, you have a camera in the briefcase and all that. And you say, hey, my car's making a noise. And all of a sudden they go and they say, hey, you need a new transmission, you pay for it and everything else. Before you went in, though, you went to another auto shop and found out the transmission was perfectly fine. That, I think, is some really good consumer-based undercover journalism. And most would agree. You're helping society by showing, hey, there's a shady operation here, blah, 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 blah. My question is, how far do you take it? Because there is some undercover journalism going on, and it does personally, it makes me a little uncomfortable. I'm not going to say it's right or wrong, but I want to get your opinion. What if you go on to dating apps and you pretend to be in a relationship with somebody for the purpose of extracting information about themselves or their employer? Meanwhile, they think that they are building a life with you. Maybe it's only 2 dates or 5 dates, or, what are your thoughts of that when your purpose is to extract secrets, but truthfully, you're being highly deceptive.
Right. Well, that's really interesting in itself, because this happened in, I think it was from the 70s to the 2000s, maybe. I might have that wrong. There was a great podcast called Bed of Lies about it in the UK, where, and I've also got a chapter on it in the book as it happens. Basically, the police in the UK had a secret force, secret sort of agency of spies, and they were trained to go and infiltrate leftist aggravators. So these tended to be mostly women and young women. And so basically they went and got fake names. They started to look and act like hippies. They learned the lingo of the sort of hippie lefty cause and all of these things. And they went and met at these rallies. They would meet these people, these women. It was mostly male spies and female women, but it was the other way around sometimes as well. There were some female spies and male victims. And they started relationships with these leftist aggravators or whatever. And things got really out of hand because they started to marry these leftists, and they would then even have children with them. So there were certain families where the kids were brought up, and and this one woman, I remember her description of what went on. She was on, like, I don't know if it was a honeymoon or just a holiday with her husband or whatever it was, and looked in the glove box because a phone was ringing, and it was a whole separate phone, separate passport, separate everything. And she was like, I've had 10 years of my life has been a lie. I mean, this is just one of the worst things that's ever happened. I mean, just absolutely terrible, just terrible betrayal of trust, deception, and messing with people's lives. And these were leftist aggravators. Look, no one gets more wound up by like left-wing protesters than me, but these were not like Antifa today. My understanding was, these were like women going to a protest and like was burning a bra, and suddenly
so
they got 50.
Okay, as an example of it, it's not like I interviewed an undercover FBI agent who, her and her husband both were undercover with what are called eco-terrorists. People who are blowing up buildings and different things. They hung out with them, but they weren't marrying people in there. They were acting as if they were part of it and ultimately helped bring them down. So you're not necessarily talking about that. You're talking about going to the extreme, and that seems to be extreme, of actually marrying somebody and then having children, which is a hell of a complication for a relationship. Now we've got a generation of issues of that issue.
Well, because people are not robots, even the spies. And when you put them in where they have to do a fake relationship for 10 years or 20 years with a woman, you might fall in love. You might change your political beliefs. You might not know who you are, and you're one person with her, you're another person with your handler. It's just a ridiculous situation to be in. I don't think I have, or that any of us have, the answer to to what extent. I think that's what you're asking, really. To what extent is it okay to impinge not just upon someone's secrecy, but upon their privacy in order to get results? I do a whole bit on the difference between privacy and secrecy. And I guess what I found, I mean, it's obvious once you think about it, but privacy is stuff that happens at home or whatever it might be. Secrecy is when that stuff transgresses some kind of societal norm of the time. So obviously Alan Turing it was secret that he was gay in a time because that transgressed societal norms. Today, that would not have to be a secret. It would just be a merely private thing. Again, like the fact that you or someone and their wife has sex, it's not really a secret because that's expected of you.
Sure.
Ironically, it would be a secret if you never had sex, right? Because people expect families. So it's funny that the least salacious thing, the thing where you're not, that is the secret, and the salacious thing, the sex, is actually just private. So there's this really interesting changeable relationship between privacy and secrecy, depending on where you are in the world, what year it is, and all of these things. And one of the reasons I talk about that difference is because of the shame that's created when something is secret rather than private. So it's secret if you're not having sex. The reason for that is because it's assumed everyone is, right? But they're not. It's secret if you are masturbating.
It's against whatever goes against the norm.
It goes against the expected norm. The expected norm, because people lie about how often they're at it. People say they're all at it. Every couple's at it. Even married couples with children are at it 3 or 4 times a week. Well, I've done surveys in the book, and I know that's nowhere near true. It's just absolutely not true. I mean, once a week is very fortunate, and you see all these people, how often a week? 10 times a week. And all that's doing is, okay, makes you feel good and you show off in front of your friends, but it makes everyone else feel they have to lie. And then everybody starts to feel shame. And it's terrible. The other way around, you look at masturbating. Men, particularly women, feel shame about that. But I did a survey, an anonymous one. They're at it all the time, right? Men are at it every day, more than women. But you're made to feel bad about it. Nose picking is another example. It's a bit of a gross one, but you feel shame if you're caught doing that. Isn't it funny that we have this shame around something that my surveys found out? Pretty much everybody feels they do way too much, way too often, all the time. And yet, when you do that in public, it's not private. It's a secret that's causing shame. So
or
that's
farts.
different. What's that?
Or farts.
Well, farts as well. Exactly. That's a very Western thing as well, around like bodily functions and things. We do everything we can to pretend that we're not animals, and don't have these things. So going back to your point about to what extent is it to interrupt the private, which is the romantic realm, which shouldn't be secret. No one's doing anything wrong or naughty. They're just being in a relationship on Tinder or whatever it is, and you want to make a story about it, and you want to expose these people for things you didn't even know when you started. I think that's pretty bad. I think that's morally objectionable. I think in very rare occasions, even in journalism, you can record. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to always tell someone when you're recording, right?
No. It depends. We're in America, so you have 2-party consent states and then 1-party consent states. And 1-party consent means that I am talking to you, I can record it. Okay. Because I consent to record the conversation and I'm part of it. A 2-party consent state means that you have to know you're being recorded. And it depends on the state. It's a very important consideration that journalists must know, because in one state it's legal, in another state it's not. And there can be factors like there were prank shows where people would call and they record like a prank call. I think it was called Crank Anchors, and they would do it in Las Vegas or Nevada and call into California, because California was a 2-party consent state. Nevada is a 1-party consent state. So anyway, it does make a difference. I didn't know.
That's really interesting. That's interesting. And I think in the UK, I'd need to double check it just now, but it's to do with, you're not supposed to do it. However, if you believe that the person you're talking to has committed a crime, if you have good reason to believe they've committed some sort of crime, or maybe if it's in the public interest, I'd have to double check that, then you can record. So again, these are always these intrusive things. We have the difference in I think it's the European Union's, whatever it is, its rules. Number 8 is something like the right to privacy. Number 10 is the right to freedom to write about whatever you want. That's a constant battle in every country's press. To what extent do I have a right to film celebrities, and to what extent do they have the right to their privacy? So I don't. The answer is I don't really know, but I would say that it's objectionable to be just guessing that men on apps are going to act in a bad way and then hoping they will, so you can write a thing about it.
Well, a lot of this is to get to their employer. Like, let's say you wanted to do an expose on Boeing. And you sit there and you go into a dating app and you look and you go, oh, this is a vice president in charge of production. And then you go out on a date with them and you start to say, hey, what do you do? And and then you get that information. That is kind of what I'm talking about.
What's that called? That's called something, isn't it? Honey? Is that a honey trap?
Yes. Honey trap, honey pot. Absolutely. So, it's a honey trap, and then there's a honey pot who causes it. So.
I think there's a lot of things that people do to help the world and to help further ideological causes, and we need those people. And those are the people often, not always, but you talked about that at the beginning of left and right, and the left and right, the far left and far right are often, not always, but they can be quite authoritarian. Whereas I think you and I, although we differ, I think on political issues, are both quite libertarian, or at least relatively so. I think some of those authoritarian people who are at the extremes do activism that me and you, maybe I don't want to speak for you actually, but I sit on my bottom at home doing nothing. I release a YouTube and I raise awareness about certain causes that are interesting to me. But I don't throw myself in front of a horse in the name of the suffragettes or whatever, and take my own life. I'm certainly not, because I'm not ideologically captured. And I'm fortunate enough to not be in a position where my rights are being taken away to such an extent. So I don't do those things. A lot of those people do, and I criticize them because they often seem mad to me. But I've started to wonder if we need those people, activists. So Greta Thunberg, she just seems like a nutcase to me. And I think she's a selfish, solipsistic, arrogant, conceited child who's now in her 20s. I could criticize her for half and I have done for a long time. I think, and I don't even criticize her, it's the parents and the way they've brought her up. Mm-hmm. However, not necessarily her, but we need people like that sometimes to push for things that at the time, people like me and you don't really think need to be done. But maybe 30 years later, people go, oh, it's a good thing that those activists did it. So that's a long way of saying the kind of person that does that kind of sting, where they call up a woman or a man and they pretend they're in love with them and they do the whole thing to get some bigger, the greater good, probably in my mind is a psychopath, but maybe a net good for society.
Well, we won't say psychopath, we'll say Machiavellian, because that's part of the triad. Well, I'm just saying that, breaking that down, because that is totally an ends justifying the means mentality that you will find in many cultish environments or activism. Okay, so last question, and you should definitely have an answer for this because you make a living asking questions. What question should I have asked you, but I neglected to?
So much pressure. Fuck. Well, you can edit this, can't you? I can have a minute to think.
Yeah, but the minute adds drama.
That's true. Well, I'm looking at the book just to see the chapter names so I can try and think of something. Okay. Part of your book, your book's called My Adventure with, the Psychology of Secrets, My Adventure with Murderers. Be good if I could read the name of the book, wouldn't it? The Psychology of Secrets, My Adventures with Murderers, Cults, and Influencers. In what sense do influencers keep secrets and trade on them?
I don't know. And are influencers cult leaders?
Well, that's it. That's it. Do you want me to answer the question?
I'm yes. Answer the question as well, and my follow-up.
Okay. This is obviously, as a YouTuber myself, as you're a YouTuber, I was focusing on cults and murderers and authoritarian regimes. One of the things I noticed was that YouTubers are themselves cult leaders in many respects, as you say. And I did this course where it was telling you how to be a good YouTuber. And some of the lessons were like non-believers. You have to talk about the people who are against you. You have to have icons and symbol. The haters, exactly. You have to have certain names that only your in-group understand and certain words you use every time. All of this stuff made me think of cults. It also made me think about audience capture and the way that influencers start to rely on secrets and trade on secrets. And you get into these really difficult positions. And I think the best example of the kind of influencer who gets just screwed by their maybe addiction or their reliance on secrets is what we call sharenters. The sharenters are sharers and it's a portmanteau of sharer and parents sharenting, who share videos of their kids. And I'm sure you've all seen over the years, particularly some of, I think it's like the FLDS and stuff like that. You've got these kind of YouTube families.
That gets into Munchausen syndrome by proxy, by the way.
There's loads of that. There's loads of the Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And basically, I try to lay out how it happens, and because I'm always a focus, as you know from before, I was even talking about these PDF files and not necessarily humanizing them, but just trying to understand them and whatever. How does a parent get into that kind of situation where they're doing something that is almost as bad as those PDF files? They are exploiting basically child labor, exploiting their children, stealing their childhoods, making their kids, in bad cases I'm talking about, making them work 24/7, keeping them in cupboards like they're in Harry Potter, forcing them to sort of work for their supper or for their dinner or whatever. How do you get to that point? And of course, some of these people might be psychopaths or Machiavellian agents or whatever it might be. But I wager that some of these people are just normal people who get into the whole YouTube thing, and you become more and more used to it and more just sort of protected from, or you stop realizing how mad some of this stuff is. And what happens is you put a few pictures up on YouTube or Instagram, and a few of your friends like them, and then more people like them. You're a bit surprised. You've never been sort of love bombed, if we're going to talk about it in a cultish way, to such an extent. And suddenly you've gone from having zero status in your world because maybe you didn't have a job and your husband or wife always did the work and you didn't have that, and now suddenly you've got all these likes and comments, and there's nothing more addictive than that. You're climbing the status game, you're climbing to the top of it out of nowhere. And so what do? I mean, it's totally normal. I know we'd all like to say we wouldn't do it, but it's normal to go, okay, I'm going to put some more cute pictures of my kids, right? Now, by the way, I would just say, I don't think you should put pictures of your kids ever, especially after some of the people I've interviewed. But fine, people do it, and they don't see much wrong with it. So they do that. More and more pictures of the kids
may find it later that they are troubled by it. And that's my concern.
That's a huge concern. That's absolutely right. So you get into this place where you're doing more and more. Suddenly you're earning from it on YouTube. And then within a year, maybe you're earning like good money. Like you're putting up pictures and videos of your family's life. And it's the boiling frog thing, as you said. Very gradually over a couple of years, you've gone from being in your mind, maybe a no one, full of shame and nothingness, I don't know what, to being this like king and queen of social media, earning 6 figures, maybe 7 figures, huge money. You're employing 4 or 5 people to help with the editing and putting up the pictures and the videos and all of these things. And then your days, well, you don't go to work 9 to 5. You wake up in the morning, you take the kids, you say, oh, don't go to school today. We're going to Disneyland. And you start filming the Disney. And the kids, their whole childhood becomes that. Now, the problem is, when the kids get to 12 or 13, you've got loads of followers who are really interested in seeing them as kids. Now, the horrible part of my mind is saying that's because there are a lot of horrible people out there who like watching your kids, okay? But there are also lots of mums and things who just want to see the kids, do the kids, they love the whatever. Okay, fine. There's a big appetite for that on YouTube. So what do? You start to panic because we've seen it. I mean, Eric, you've seen it. I've seen it. When one video is getting hundreds of thousands of views, the next one gets 1 view. And you're going, oh my God, that dip is huge.
How do I get it in? What do I do?
Yeah,
let's talk about it. Oh, it's Tom Cruise. Let's talk about him some more. Oh, it's Meghan Markle.
Tom Cruise.
Let's talk about Meghan Markle some more.
Exactly. You're absolutely right, though. It's a panic. What is the thing that will get people watching? People say, oh, you just care about the clicks. It's like, well, no, I care about all sorts of things, but without the clicks, I can't make a living and actually make this show. So you're in a bind. Now, the bind you and I have with respect to that is bad because we don't want to not have any money. Okay, but we're not like thinking about supporting a family and an army of people working for us based not on our own secrets, but revealing the secrets of our children. That's the only way for them to get views at that point. And you end up, there was one family in particular, I can't remember the name, but they're in my book, and they got to a point where it was getting lower and lower, and suddenly you start seeing this stuff with the girl, their daughter, and it's going, I don't know her name, but say it was Sarah, and it's going, Sarah has her first period, right? Now that is about as intrusive a thing as you could ever put up, right? And there's a picture of her in the thumbnail. She's looking, I can't even remember what she was wearing, but it's like, this is not appropriate by any, and it becomes their biggest viewed video of all time. Now, they did another one, because what do you do then? The next videos start to go down again. You're panicking again. How can I feed the family? How can I employ these people? What do I do? They put up one, so-and-so, the kid, Sarah, wears a pregnancy bump. Now, she's 13, she's wearing a pregnancy bump. We know that there are men out there with a fetish for children who have their first periods and for children wearing pregnancy bumps. It's a weird fetish if you don't have it to imagine it, but they do have those fetishes. And the parents probably are, if not admitting it entirely to themselves, they're on some level aware of that. But that's the panic. That's what they've gotten themselves into through the boiling frog. They didn't see it happening. They've become immune to the madness of it. And that's what happens to those guys. They're trading off the secrets and the private secrets of their children's lives to make a living. It's sad. Well,
happy to end on such a dark note, so I will put it out to the audience. What secrets have you had to hold or share that you want to discuss? Or what has it done to you to have a secret? How has it personally affected you? Love to hear, and you can do hypotheticals or any way you want. Obviously, I don't necessarily want specific details. And I'm going to have a link to the book, Psychology of Secrets, in the description. Definitely click it below. Any book you buy, I will even get a little bit of an affiliation, couple shekels out of it. And I always appreciate any kind of income. And Andrew, thank you so much, man.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Can I just say, actually, it's got to be the UK Amazon. Do you still get the shekels out of that?
Yes, and it is on US Amazon because that's how I got the audiobook. You could get the Kindle and audiobook both in the US, and I only do audiobooks, so I win. Somebody might ship over a book for me that's signed if I'm really nice to them.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see about that. I have to go to a post office, do a whole thing. But if people want the hardback, it's got to be the UK for now until September. It's got to be the UK Amazon, and they'll ship it over for an extra few shekels or whatever it might be.
Awesome. Dude, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. What a great interview, Eric.